All right, so this is Knitting in the Hospital Wing, episode 2. Just a time where I can sit and awkwardly talk into the camera of my computer about knitting and a little bit of sewing, and mostly about Harry Potter because it is my favorite thing in the entire world. And I don't have very many friends around me who are as nerdy as I am and just love knitting and Harry Potter. So this is how I sort of get rid of the need to constantly talk about Harry Potter so I don't drive everybody in my life completely insane. It's been about a month, so I have a lot to talk about, which is a little bit ironic because I am in my 4th year of medical school, and, this is a time in my medical school career where I should really be focusing on things like doing my board exams, which I took yesterday. I took my last written board exam of medical school yesterday, which felt amazing to be done with, but it was also just a 9-hour exam that leaves you completely exhausted afterward. But in lieu of doing what I should have been doing and really focusing on studying for that and applying to residency, I have instead been knitting a lot to distract myself from the stress that I feel. I have a lot to talk about. But let's start with what I'm wearing. So this is the Magpie Tendencies by Mellisa Alexander-Loomis, or Skeinanigans. I call this my no bigger than a bowtruckle sweater. I really love knitting this. I think it's like a really great sweater to knit when you have, like everyone has said, like one skein of yarn that you really, really love, that you don't really know exactly what you are planning on doing with. I think that it's nice for beginners because it is like really fast and you get a lot done really quickly. Like I think this only took me like a week, less than a week to knit. The only thing that I think would be really hard is you have sort of the I-cord cast on, and the construction at the top is so fun and so interesting and so weird, which I think for people who have been knitting for a little while longer means that it's an interesting construction and it's kind of different. But I think for beginners, they might be like, what the actual fuck is going on? So I don't know that I would recommend it for beginners unless that there is like a knit along or someone who's like really willing to like sit down and like help walk through the beginning. But anyway, this is out of 6 and 7 fibers. The main color, or the main yarn, is their barley yarn. I think it was fur, but I didn't keep the band, so I don't know exactly what color this is. Sorry, my cat is like running around right there. Her name is Sansa, because Harry Potter is not the only fantasy that I am obsessed with. She's scratching our couch, which is why we cannot have nice things. Anyway, then I also did the contrast. So you can see here this contrast. And this is also 6 and 7 fiber. This is the Milo base, which I think is her sock yarn base. I think it's a merino nylon yarn. And this is Wilshire Secrets. And I decided to name it No Bigger Than a Bowtruckle because in my brain, and I think this is one of the great things about reading rather than watching television or movies, is that in my brain, bowtruckles are green. And I think they are actually green, but that's my imagination for you. And why I think this is so special and why I decided to name it No Bigger Than a Bowtruckle is because in the final book, one of the first chapters in the final book, I think is called The 7 Potters, and it is when 7 people agree to drink, or I guess 6 people, and 7 is Harry Potter himself, so 6 people drink polyjuice potion that has a bit of Harry in it, and they turn into Harry, and they're there to escort Harry off away from number 4 Privet Drive. And this is something that's really important. It is only a few days before he turns 17, so before he becomes an adult in the wizarding world. And it's so important because once he leaves number 4 Grimmauld Place for the last time, and knowing that he won't be coming back there, then the spell that his mother put on any blood relative of hers will break, and he will not be protected in the house anymore. And at that time, Hagrid is there with Harry, and he says, "I brought you here 16 years ago when you were no bigger than a bowtruckle. Seems only right that I should be the one to take you away now." Which I just think is so amazing, and really shows the arc of Harry and Hagrid's relationship, that Hagrid was the first one to bring Harry Potter to number 4 Privet Drive on Sirius Black's motorcycle in one of the first chapters, if not the first chapter. I think it's actually the second chapter. I'm going to have to read that. But in the beginning of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on which side of the Atlantic you're on, Hagrid is the one who's tasked with bringing the boy who lived, the boy who brought down Voldemort, to number 4 Privet Drive. And in the very last book, he is the one who is tasked with taking him away from there and on to his next adventure. And so I just thought that was such a beautiful sentiment, and so wanted to have a sweater that's named after sort of the friendship and the mentorship that is there between Harry and Hagrid. And for me, I guess I should say, in my personal opinion, finished objects count if they are finished and not necessarily all of the ends are woven in, because I really, really hate weaving in ends. My cat is just being like a terror right now. I'm sorry. You're probably hearing her run around her house. Sometimes I swear she like just needs to get all this energy out and like starts running around. Anyway, so this is my Madame Rosmerta's Poison Oak Matured Mead sweater. This is Andrea Mowry's Wool and Honey sweater, and it is knitted out of Knerd string fiber, 4-ply fingering in the Penny Lane colorway. I changed this just a little bit. I'll put it on for you to see. But essentially the only thing that I did that was different is that Andrea Mowry has you knit it to like a 3/4 sleeve length. And for me, I just wanted to use as much of this yarn as I could. And so I just decided to knit it long sleeve. So you can kind of see I knit the garter for quite a while until it was about 3/4 sleeve, and then I put on a long 2x2 rib cuff so that you still kind of get a little bit of the like billowiness, but then it comes down and sort of has this like cool long hem, which I just thought was really cool. I also did it cropped like she has. I really like crop sweaters. I wear a lot of high-waisted jeans and high-waisted pants at work and also just in my day-to-day life. And so it works well for me because I pretty much always have jeans that are like very, very high. So yeah, I really, really love this sweater. I think that the detail of it is just really interesting. And this stitch pattern is just really fascinating. And at first when I started reading it, I was like, what the fuck? Like, how am I going to do that? But then, you know, everything sort of turned out and it's great. So yeah, I really, really love this sweater. There are a few mistakes, as there always are, but I think in general, I'm really proud of it and I'm really excited to wear it. I think it's going to be a sweater that I wear like all of the time during the fall. So yeah, I'm going to take it off though because it is like 100 degrees in Denver. And I am too hot to wear a wool sweater that is not like practically nothing because this is very light. So other finished objects that I have. So this is the Kobuk hat by Caitlin Hunter of Boyland Knits. This hat was really, really fun. This is the second time that I've knit this hat. The first time was a Christmas gift for my sister-in-law, and she really loved it and wears it all the time. This is out of Mad Tosh in the DK Twist Venti Dragon Mocha colorway, and then also I held it with some just Rowan Kidsilk, so you can see the haze here. So Rowan Kidsilk haze in just like a dark green colorway. And you can see the mountain motif that's in this, which I just think is like a really beautiful motif that Caitlin Hunter added to this hat to just make it a little bit more interesting. So I decided to name this hat Hagrid and Madam Maxime Try to Enlist the Giants. Because in the, now I can't remember, in the 7th book, Hagrid and Madame Maxime go to the mountains of Europe to try to enlist, no, it's the 6th book. It's definitely, oh my gosh, this is gonna drive me nuts. It's definitely not the 7th book. I think it actually might be the 5th book that this happens, because it is the book in which, because Gorp comes back, so it's definitely the 5th book. Whoa, sorry. Hold on, I'm gonna need to fact check myself on this one. Anyway, Hagrid and Madame Maxime, who are both half giants, are tasked by Dumbledore to go into the mountains and find the giants and try to enlist them to join their cause rather than join Voldemort's cause, which does not go very well. However, Hagrid does meet his half-brother Grop and brings him back with him, and I think that their friendship, and I guess they're not friends because they're family. We can be both. Anyway, I think that that's like a really beautiful part of the Harry Potter series, and I also think something that I really love about the Harry Potter series is that there are creatures within the Harry Potter universe that are treated as less than other creatures. For instance, the giants. Also, you see that with Lupin and the werewolves. And I think what's beautiful is that has a really wonderful way of showing that we're all connected, just like all beings in this world are connected. And, that stigma and things like that are not productive and are only born out of ignorance and hatred. And so, so many lessons to learn from Harry Potter. But yeah, so this is my Kobuk hat by Caitlin Hunter, and I'm calling it Hagrid and Madame Maxime Try to Enlist the Giants. All right. Last finished object, I told you I've been very busy, is the Spectre Specs sweater. And I'm just realizing that I forgot to write down exactly who the designer of this sweater is, but I will put it down in the down bar so that everyone remembers, including myself, since this is only for me. But this is a sweater. So last year, I really tried to make a lot of Christmas presents for everybody in my family, and things did not go well because I just did not start until very late. And so this year, I was like, I am going to start early. And so that's what I'm doing. So this I'm calling Luna Spectre Specs, and it is a sweater dress for my niece for Christmas, and I just think it is so fun. I knit this in less than a week. I think it was in like 4 days, and it's it's for a 2-year-old, but it is pretty big for a sweater dress, because it is a dress. So this was a bottom up sweater that's knit, and then the colorwork yoke is knit last. But I wanted to use as much of this pink as I possibly could. And I also just went completely rogue on this. So essentially what I used for this sweater was just the colorwork motif and the numbers for casting on and the numbers for like how big the sleeves should be. But other than that, I just kind of did my own thing. So I cast on, and I won't share too much because this is still a pattern that I bought, but I cast on a certain number of stitches, and then I just went immediately into this colorwork motif. And as I was doing it, I was just thinking about Luna Lovegood the entire time, because I just think these colors remind me so much of the Spectre Specs, but also just remind me so much of Luna and how she's kind of strange and mysterious, but also so loving and so kind. And I think, you know, my niece she's not strange. She's not strange. I mean, she's only 2, so who knows? Maybe she will be really strange, but I love strange people, so hopefully she will be strange. Because all the best people in the world are a little bit strange. But I think that, you know, my niece is a really loving and really kind person, and I think you can tell that already just with the way that she wants to share and the way that she wants to interact with you. And, you know, she has so much empathy. It's so clear that if you're having a bad day, she just knows to come and give you a hug. And we are really blessed because they only live about 10 blocks away from us, so I've really gotten to see her grow up, and I'm excited to continue watching her grow up. But anyhow, so this is my Luna Spectre Specs sweater. This is mostly knit out of some Mad Tosh that I had left over from last year, actually. So the main pink color is the Mad Tosh Death by Elocution. Not sure how to pronounce that. The purple that runs here is also Mad Tosh in the Iris colorway. And this blue that you see in the color work is Jaded Dreams. And then this yellow here is actually Asylum Fibers Twisted in the You Pansy colorway, which I think is hilarious. And yeah, so essentially what I did to make this a sweater dress is I knit the yoke, and then I separated here, and I just started knitting. And you can see here that 3 times I increased 4 stitches until I got down here. And then I did a similar colorwork motif, sort of using how they do colorwork up here, down here with the numbers of stitches that I had. And then I increased for the next round just so that there would be a little flare out at the end. And you can see the colorwork here a little bit better. And then I just did a garter ridge edge. There are a lot of ends to weave in for this because it has the stripes going down and it has both colorwork on the top and the bottom. And I was talking to my husband and I was like, I knit Scotia this for Christmas. Scotia is my niece. I knit her this for Christmas. It is your job to weave in all the ends because I hate weaving in ends. I think it's very boring. So this is my sweater dress, Christmas gift number 1 for Scotia, my niece. That is all for finished objects, except that I also have a project bag that I will talk about later, because this might be like the longest episode ever. So let's move into works in progress. Let's first talk about some socks that I have going. So I have 3 different pairs of socks that I'm working on right now. The first one that I have here is kind of a Frankenstein of a few different patterns. But this is Nomadic Yarns Yak Base in their Diagon Alley colorway. And for this, I also added the top here is a picot edge in the Knerd string 4-ply fingering in the Penny Lane colorway, which is the same colorway that I used to knit my sweater by Andrea Mowry in. And I really love the Pico Edge colorway. I think that this made me realize that I think ribbing is a nice top to a sock, but I also think that we should think out of the box a little bit more and have something, you know, a little bit cute at the top of our sock to sort of poke out. And so essentially what I did is I just knit for several rows, and then I did the Pico edge here, and then I did a 1x1 rib so that when you fold it in and sew it down, which I have not done yet, then it will sort of hold on to your leg a little bit better. But I just think that is so cute, and I think I'm going to do it for a lot more of my socks because I think it actually has a little bit more of a professional edge to it than other socks. But the pattern that I used on this is a free pattern on Ravelry, and it is the Soda Water Socks by Yucca Knit. And it's really fun. It just like adds a nice little eyelet to your sock, and I think, you know, especially with a self-striping sock, it's something subtle that really lets the stripes come through, but at the same time also adds a little something different to your sock so that it's not just a vanilla sock. And Diagon Alley obviously is like one of the most magical places in my opinion in all of Harry Potter, other than probably Hogwarts, because it is sort of the shopping district of the magical world where, you know, Harry is really first exposed to magic in a very real way, and sees this life that that's going to be his life and that he should have been exposed to earlier but didn't have the opportunity to. And I just think that as a way into the magical world, Diagon Alley is such a magical thing. My next sock is, speaking of just plain vanilla socks, this is another nomadic yarn sock. I'm working right now on a box of socks, which I'm definitely not going to finish well pairs of socks, but this is Nomadic Yarns in her Mischief Managed colorway. So, you know, big surprise. I'm such a big fan of Harry Potter that I want to make a bunch of socks that are Harry Potter themed so that I can always sort of have a piece of Harry with me all the time. But this is the Mischief Managed colorway. This was a gift from my mom that she just got me out of the blue, just really for nothing, which I think it was so special. I am really close to my mom, and I think she's just like such a strong and powerful and wonderful human being, and she really cares what I'm really excited about, and I've always been really excited about Harry Potter, and now that I'm excited about yarn, I think for her it's something that we can really connect with and really makes her excited as well. And I think, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, and the reason why I just pause is because just to take a step to think about my mom and about her, I mean, she was the one who introduced me to Harry Potter. She was the one who bought Harry Potter for the first time for us and really read it with us and got us really excited about it. And I remember it was something that every night, like before we would go to bed, we would have story time where my mom would sit in our room, me and my brother Rory in our rooms, and read Harry Potter to us and talk to us about the story. And this was also, I don't know if it was before books on, I mean, it wasn't before books on tape. There were certainly books on tape, but it might have been before Harry Potter had books on tape. Or we might have just been too poor to be able to afford books on tape, and they were probably really backlogged at the library. But I remember my mom, we used to go on these long, well, we used to go on family trips up to South Dakota because a bunch of my family lives in South Dakota as well, and we would go up there every summer and go to a cabin in the woods and, you know, just spend time with family. And my mom, which is crazy to me because I get so car sick, but she used to have the books with her, and she would just read to us the books out of Harry Potter as we were driving up. So and I remember her reading them, and we would be so into it and just completely enthralled in the story. And then we would, get into like a windy road because we're coming from the mountains going to mountains, and so there's a lot of like windy road passes, and my mom would like shut the book and be like, I'm gonna puke. And we would just be like, come on, keep reading. Now when I'm looking back, I'm like, wow, bless her. Anyway, this was a gift from my mom. These are my Mischief Managed socks. This is a reference to the Marauders map. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs are the Marauders, and the Marauders map, as we all know, is a magical map that shows Hogwarts and all of the people in it. I think something that I really love about the Marauders map is that it can be used even when you're not at Hogwarts, and I think one of the most beautiful things about the Marauders map is actually when Harry uses it to just sort of watch Ginny walking around Hogwarts Castle in the 7th book when he's not with her, but he still really clearly cares about her and is thinking about her all the time. I think one of the biggest injustices of the movies is just the fact that Ginny Weasley seems like such a weirdo, and like that their romantic relationship kind of came out of nowhere, because it didn't. It was like subtly growing for a long time. But anyway, I'm done with half of this sock, and then I'm just also working on the second sock as well. So I'm actually almost done with that. And you guys, I got the coolest things. So my husband saw me eyeing these on Etsy, and he was like, why don't you just get some? And I'll talk about them a little bit more in acquisitions, but look at this Progress Creeper. So I called it Progress Creeper, which I think is hilarious. Progress Keeper. But this is, so the first time that Harry ever sees the Marauders map is in the 3rd book, when he really wants to go to Hogsmeade, but Vernon Dursley did not sign his paperwork. And so this is a Progress Keeper that is the Prisoner of Azkaban. I mean, shut up. And look at this. It's like so well made that there are even pages in this book. I just, stop it. Spoiler alert, I have 7 of them. I bet you can guess what they are. Anyway, and then this is just a sock bag that I made out of some amazing Hogwarts house fabric that I got at Joann Fabrics. My last sock whip is the Acromantula Venom socks, and I think last time that I was working on these, sorry, this is just a tangled mess of yarn, so I'm gonna untangle this as I continue to talk to myself. I don't know who I'm apologizing to. I'm apologizing to myself. Anyway, so this is the Acromantula Venom colorway by Teeny Button Studio, and I just think that it is the best name for a yarn maybe ever in the history of the world. But when I was first knitting these, I was knitting this slip stitch pattern that I thought was great, but I don't think that it showed off the yarn as well as I wanted to, and it just wasn't fitting me right, and so I decided to change it. And also I think after I made this sock and I made this picot edge, I realized that I do like the ribbing, but I also think like we can do cooler stuff with the tops of our socks, which I also think is important, because a lot of times, especially when you're out and about and it's the middle of winter and you're wearing, let me angle this up, and you are wearing socks, really the only part of the sock that you actually see is the tip of the sock. So to me, it's like weird that there isn't more going on with the tops of socks. So I got this book, the Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible by Hitomi Shida, a while ago, and I realized that in this book there are a lot of, I do a 34 stitch sock, and I realized that within this book there are a lot of stitch patterns that are divisible, by, say, 8 or 16 or 32 that can kind of go into these sock patterns. And so I decided to take one of the stitch patterns from an ending here and stitch the top of this sock in this sort of lace pattern. Let's put it on my hand here. So it's this lace pattern, which I don't think you can see super well on my hand. But it's a lace pattern that then also has these twisted rib stitches here, and I just continue the twisted stitch ridges down the sock so that it actually fits so well, because it's sort of like a sock that has ribbing in it that kind of stretches if you need it to stretch, but also holds on when you need it to hold on. So I am totally psyched about this. I think it's really awesome. I'm glad that I decided to rip it out and redo it. And I just continued the rib on the top, and then I just did a fish lips kiss heel, which is what I pretty much always do. And I really like how it kind of micro striped in the heel, which it didn't really do or it sort of self-striped, I guess, in the heel, which I thought was really fun. But yeah, Acromantula Venom socks. I have already mentioned this, but Acromantula Venom is important because it is essentially how Harry Potter finds out from Slughorn what the Horcruxes are, and sort of is actually able to get that memory from him, which is really important for ultimately destroying Voldemort. And on here is another progress keeper, which is the Chamber of Secrets. And I know that this isn't when Harry actually gets the or when Horace Slughorn actually gets the Acromantula Venom, but it will become clear later why this one is on here. But I think it is interesting because this is the first time that he sort of meets the Acromantula within the forest. So I thought that was interesting. Another work in progress is this, which I shared with you last time, but just one more time. This is the Excuse Me shawl by Stephen West. And this is a brioche shawl. This is the first time that I've ever knit brioche, and I did take the brioche class that he recommends in the pattern off of Blueprint, and I found that to be incredibly quintessential. I actually feel very comfortable with brioche now, and because I bought that class, I can always go on and re-watch it if I ever get confused. But I am into the sort of last section where you start doing this increase here, and it's kind of hard to see because it's on such small needles, but this is my snake nail to the gaunt shack shawl, and it is knit out of La Bien Aimée, which was a gift from my mom in the Emmeline colorway, and then the back is Wollonbine yarns in the Deadly Nightshades colorway. And on here, because it is the snake nail to the gaunt shack, I have this stitch marker. Sorry, this is hilarious. Which is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, which is what should have been on these socks. But I felt like the book cover went a little bit better because it's all of the greens. And then also you can actually see Harry and Dumbledore on the cover of this book, overlooking the Pensieve, and they go into the Pensieve and see the memory of the gaunt shack, which is why I decided to put it on here. I'll just show you these balled up. So these are the yarns that I am using to make this, and I just think they're so beautiful. It's coming up a little bit more green or blue, but it's more of a teal color. I'm loving this knit. I think right now it's getting into the part where it's a bit of a slog because it is so long. Each row is so long. but I'm really enjoying it. The next work in progress that I have, I do not have a name for yet. This is something that I've been working on forever, and to be honest, I don't love it. I don't love it just because the yarn is kind of hard to work with. It's, I believe, a Quince & Co. yarn. I don't even remember what kind of yarn it is, but I can look it up and put it in the show notes. It is a merino. It's a beautiful yarn. It's merino and cotton. And because of the cotton, I originally got this because I'm making this for my husband. It's a sweater. It's the first sweater that I ever started. And I made it for him, which is so surprising. Like, why did I do that? But clearly, I've knit many other sweaters in the meantime, and I have not finished this. And it's because this yarn is just feels weird. I think because it is a mixture of the merino and the cotton, it kind of feels like synthetic, and I don't know, it just bothers me. But I finished the body, and I haven't sewn it yet, but this is the body, and this is a Michelle Wang pattern. It's hard for you to see. There you go. It's washing me out so much. But it is like this sort of chevron pattern, and it's like a lovely pattern, and I think this is a really, really good knit for beginners. Like, I actually think that this sweater looks pretty good, even though it's my first sweater, just because it was like so easy. It's just been a slog. Also because it's for a man, and so it's giant. And then I'm also almost finished with one sleeve, and this is it's knit bottom up, and then you sew the sleeves on. And I'm just knitting this on a US 5 in some Licca needles. I really like the Licca needles a lot. And on here, I don't have a name for this yet, I think because I'm just like, but I have the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows on here, and the reason why I have that is because it's my husband's favorite book of the Harry Potter series. And then I will just show you this. So this is another finished object that I have, which is covered in cat hair, but this is a project bag that I made out of fabric that I got from Fancy Tiger Studio. So this is a waxed, like purple waxed canvas. It's coming off more red, but it's definitely like that's a good color. It's sort of like a burgundy color. And then the inside is this really beautiful yellow flower fabric, and then I also got this contrasting fabric which has these like green and mushrooms. I thought that was hilarious. So this pattern is a pattern that I bought off of Etsy. It's the NeverNotKnitting, their social stitcher project bag. And it's really great. I did add some things to it. Like, for instance, I decided to add this strap to it just because I think it's kind of nice to have something to grab a hold of. Or, I mean, I don't think you would ever like, knit with this hanging off because your arm would like die. But I do think it's nice to have this. And then, so on this side, I do have the wax canvas. And then on the other side, you can see poking through, I have this, this fabric here. And then this is a pocket, and then there are also pockets on the other side. You can see here, which I just did in the yellow fabric and then lined with the wax canvas, and then on the other side is that green fabric with the mushrooms. I really love it. I think that it was the first time I ever installed a zipper on anything, and I think the directions were really great. It's a nice big bag, so I can fit this as a worsted weight man sweater, and I can fit it in here really easily without having to like smush it down. So that is great. I'm also like, I'm learning to sew, and this is just something that I'm going to show you really quick, but this is the Hugh's dress by Friday Pattern Co. Can you tell that it's a dress? No, you can't because it's just the bodice of the dress. But this is a dress that I am making out of this awesome Hogwarts house paper, Hogwarts House fabric, and I'm really excited for it. I think it's really great because I'm going into pediatrics, and so I can wear awesome Harry Potter dresses at work. Anyway, I am just working on this now. It's the first time I've ever sewn a princess seam, so it's probably really terrible, but you know what? I'm really excited to see how it turns out. I'm really bad, guys. I never make a swatch. Well, I very rarely make a swatch. I almost never make a toile or however the fuck you pronounce that. And I didn't this time. So I do have one more work in progress, but I think that I'm going to wait to talk about that until we sort of start talking about the Harry Potter reading section that I'm going to do for myself. So what I'm going to talk about now is just some acquisitions that I got because I have been a little bit naughty, and I think part of that is because when I am really stressed, I buy yarn and then I knit with it because I think that that's more fun than thinking about how stressed I am. Anyway, so I got 2 sock yarns, and these are sort of to go towards my Harry Potter box of socks. The first one is by Lola Bean Yarn Co. And I was at one of my local yarn stores, Fancy Tiger Crafts, and I was just sort of browsing. I actually wasn't really planning on buying anything. And then I was just looking at this skein of yarn, and I was like, oh my god, it's so pretty. I really love how sort of dirty it is, and the beige color. I think this would just make a really versatile pair of socks that I can wear with anything. And then it's called Dobby. It's called Dobby. I was literally like, of course I'm gonna buy this. And so I bought this Lola Bean Yarn Co. Dobby. I'm really excited to make socks out of it. I also love that I only really use half a skein for socks so that I can make a shawl out of it or something like that after I'm done. The other thing I have is also from one of my favorite dyers right now, Teeny Button Studio, and this is the Window to the Great Lake colorway. Oh wait, I also just want to talk about Dobby for a hot second. I won't talk about it too long because I'll talk about him a lot more, but I will just say that I think that he is a very underrated character in the Harry Potter series, particularly for those who have only seen the movies. Because in the movies, it's this really weird thing where he is in book 2, and then he's in the second movie, and then he shows up in the 7th movie out of nowhere, and you're like, I haven't thought about Dobby since the second movie, when in fact, he's a very important character in all of the movies. For instance, I feel like Neville takes on a lot of Harry Potter stuff, or a lot of Dobby stuff, but for instance, the gillyweed that Harry uses in the second task of the 4th book, Dobby gave that to him, not Neville. Not Neville. That's just an example. Anyway, this is Teeny Button Studio, dyed out of New Orleans. She has a lot of Harry Potter colorways, so this is also the same dyer that dyed my Acromantula Venom socks. Oh my gosh, just look at this color. It is so beautiful. This is her fingering weight, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, Window to the Great Lake colorway, which I think is really important for several reasons. It is a Hogwarts reference. The Great Lake is the lake that's right outside of Hogwarts. It's where the second task of the 4th book takes place. There are a lot of magical creatures that live there, but Ravenclaw Tower has a window to the Great Lake. And I am part of the Ravenclaw house. So I also think that these are going to be a really versatile sock because it's mostly gray, but then also has these specks of blue and green and stuff like that. So I think that these are going to be really great. The next thing that I have is I have been looking at Bolenvine yarns. Her podcast is amazing. I think it's really cool that she incorporates both sewing and knitting, and I think her colorways are just so interesting. And she made this little dot neck crop and then she made Soldotna crop kits, and I really shouldn't have bought this because I already have so many sweater quantities, but you guys, I'm gonna wear this thing all the time. I like cannot believe how beautiful it is. So this is her Smitten DK base. It's 4 skeins. This is 80-10-10, so 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. This is in the Cortesian colorway. So beautiful. This is Grim. It's so pretty. Deadly Nightshades, which is also what I am making my snake nail to the gaunt shack out of. This might be one of my favorite colorways of all time. I mean, I just think it's so dirty in the prettiest way. I just love it. And then Revenge of the Harpsichord. And these together she's calling patina, which I think is essentially like what happens with copper when it oxidizes. But I am going to call this like Bars of Azkaban, because I think, you know, like in the movies in particular, but just how I imagine it, it's because it's sort of in the middle of the ocean, it's like rusted and everything just seems to me like it would be like water worn and stuff like that. So I just, to me, I see like rust. And so this is going to be my Bars of Azkaban Soldotna crop. And I'm so excited, but I'm not going to cast it on quite yet. I'm waiting. And then I did get some Progress Creepers. So, Progress Creepers. I'm just going to start calling them that. Just be like, it's a little creeper just here waiting. But, so these I got, this is from the New Leaf store on Etsy. It's the Harry Potter inspired US edition miniature book charm bracelet. So this was actually a charm bracelet that you could either get with the lobster claw or with like a fixed charm on it. And I decided to do the lobster claw so that I can then use them as Progress Keepers. And I have since added some other Progress Keepers to this because I actually think it's like a great way to hold on to your Progress Keepers. But I've already shown you many of these because I already have them on like all of my projects because they're my favorite things ever. But I will just show you the 2 that are left on here. So this is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone, and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. What was so amazing to me about this is the attention to detail. So she prints them off. They're exactly what the original covers of the Harry Potter books looked like. What I love about them is you can get them in the new edition, the old edition, the US edition, the British edition. So I kind of want to collect all of them, but that seems a little ridiculous. But the attention to detail is crazy because as you can see, and I did not even expect this, but this one is the Sorcerer's Stone, and this one is the Goblet of Fire, and look, they're different sizes. Which, I mean, I guess is not that hard, but whatever. I was like, wow. But she is amazing. All of her stuff is so cool, and you can get any books or any book series that you want. You can just email her and be like, these are the books I want. So if you're not completely a Harry Potter nerd like I am, but you're a total nerd for like Game of Thrones or something like that, or A Song of Ice and Fire, I guess is what the book is called. Anyway, you can get these and get them in whatever you want, which I just think they're so awesome. Look at that. Oh my God, they're so cool. The other thing that I did is I did the Simply Serving Woolly and Witches Wizards Mystery Club. I don't know why it's so hard for me to go with that. And with that, you could just put in what your Hogwarts house was. And this is on the last whip that I'm going to talk about. But it came with this amazing charm, which is a sheep with a sorting hat on it, wearing a Ravenclaw scarf. I mean, just shut up. It's so cute. And I really appreciate that what she did is the bronze, because the movies have it silver, but it's bronze. It's blue and bronze. This is the book. And then it also came with this little charm, which is my very own letter from Hogwarts, which I was waiting for when I was a child, and never came, which is really sad. Okay, we're finally to the last whip that I have, and then also into some story time. So I'll talk about the whip first, and then I'll go into story time. I know that even though I'm the only one who ever watches these, nobody else probably wants to hear about my random reading of Harry Potter. But this whip, it smells so good, you guys. I'm really, really excited about this for many different reasons, but a big part of it is just that I'm knitting it for someone who means a lot to me. And so I think when you make something that takes so much time for someone that means a lot to you, it's just really, really important. So this is, I'm calling it my Into the Pensieve sweater vest. And this is a pattern called Hunter by Jared Flood. It's going to be a sweater vest. It's knit bottom up. And you just start with a 1x1 rib here, you can see, and then it goes into this just really nice sort of Guernsey inspired stitch pattern that it's easy to memorize. It's just a repeat of 4 rows, but it, is engaging, and it makes it easy for you to see that things are changing. I actually put this on here yesterday, and this is how much I knit yesterday. So after I got home from my board exam, I was like, all I want to do is sit on the couch and do nothing and knit. So that's what I did. So this is really special for a lot of different reasons. So me and my husband grew up in the same town. And my husband's dad is someone that I've known. I think I first met him in middle school. It might have been high school. But it was like late middle school or early high school. We went to a climbing gym there, and we were climbing together, and I met him, and I had such a crush on Sean, his son, my now husband. But I remember, we were just really good friends at the time, and I just remember meeting Bob, and he has been such an important part of my life, but also, a lot of people's lives around us. He's just a really loving and caring mentor, and so I'm really excited to be able to knit him this sweater. And he just retired. So he's been working in Steamboat for like over 40 years. Steamboat is where I grew up, Steamboat, Colorado. And so we decided, me and Sean, that we were going to get him yarn that is from sheep from where we live. And so this is the WZ Felt and Yarn High Mountain Wool of Routt County, Colorado. And this is just from this really small farm up in, the Yampa Valley, which is where I grew up. And this woman just has her farm, and she, I don't know if she hand spins these or if they're mill spun, but it's a worsted spun yarn. And so I think it's going to be really, really warm, and it's just very sheepy. Like, it's full of lanolin. My hands get really soft when I'm knitting it. It smells so good, like a sheep. It just smells so good. And I think there's something beautiful about knitting with yarn from where you grew up. Like, I feel like when I'm knitting it, that I'm knitting something like it's home, which I just think is a really beautiful thing. And so I'm calling it Into the Pensieve because it is this sort of light gray color that sort of reminds me of the like gray cloudy material that is seen in the Pensieve. So working away on this is going to be another Christmas present for the family. Like I said, I'm trying to be ahead of it this year so that I can not get completely behind. But now I am going to read a passage from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Actually, on this, I forgot to mention this, so I did point out this charm from Simply Serving, but there is also Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Come on. Can you just see those together? What? They're so good. I don't understand. And it actually is the biggest. It's the widest of them all. I highly recommend. I want to get like all of my favorite books in that. Like, the other thing that I thought would be really fun is if you wanted to do like a book club with your knitting friends where you're sort of knitting a book, reading a book and knitting something that's like connected to the book somehow. I just think that that would be like a really fun way to stay connected with people. But anyway, so I'm not going to be talking about knitting anymore. I think I've talked about knitting enough. I have so many objects around me, but so now I'm going to kind of move into the story time portion of this. I think this is going to be a pretty long portion because it is a pretty long excerpt from Harry Potter, but I do want to read it just for my own memory, and then I'm just going to talk about thoughts that I have and sort of thoughts that I had when I first read it, and then how that changes as more and more books come out. So if you don't want to hear any Harry Potter, let's be realistic, nobody's watching this but me, then that's all for the knitting. But all right, moving on. So this is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. This is the 5th book in the series, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt out of Snape's Worst Memory. So just for a little bit of context, this is when Harry and Snape are working on trying to block Harry's mind. They're working on occlumency, which is sort of trying to block Harry's mind from Voldemort so that he can't access Harry's thoughts anymore. Snape always takes a couple of memories out of his mind, puts them into the Pensieve, and then they work on occlumency. And I think that this is really important because Harry's always like, why does he do that? And the reason why he does that is because he has some memories that he does not want Harry to see if Harry, for example, uses a Protego charm or something like that so that Harry can access Snape's thoughts. But Draco comes in and sort of pulls Snape out of the office, and Harry is left there with the Pensieve. And it's just an excerpt about his decision to look into the Pensieve and look into Snape's worst memory, and then what he sees there. So this is probably going to be a long one, so just bear with me. Okay. I'm sorry if I'm sniffly. I guess I should just mention, I was actually hospitalized last week. I got pneumonia in both of my lungs. I showed up septic with 4 out of 4 SIRS criteria, which means that I had tachycardia, a high heart rate. I had a white blood cell count of 22,000, which is very high. So I had a systemic infection. I had a respiratory rate that was very high as well. I think it was like in the 40s, and I had a fever of 102. So I was in the hospital for 2 days getting IV antibiotics, and now I feel a lot better. I'm definitely not 100%, and I'm still like coughing, and I have asthma too, so it just takes me a while to get over these types of things. But anyway, so Snape's worst memory. Okay. The silvery stuff within began to swirl very fast. Harry leaned forward over it and saw that it had become transparent. He was, once again, looking down into a room as though through a circular window in the ceiling. In fact, unless he was much mistaken, he was looking down upon the great hall. His breath was actually fogging the surface of Snape's thoughts. His brain seemed to be in limbo. It would be insane to do the thing that he was so strongly tempted to do. He was trembling. Snape could be back at any moment, but Harry thought of Cho's anger, of Malfoy's jeering face, and a reckless daring seized him. He took a great gulp of breath and plunged his face into the surface of Snape's thoughts. At once, the floor of the office lurched, tipping Harry headfast into the Pensieve. He was falling through cold blackness, spinning furiously as he went, and then he was standing in the middle of the great hall, but the 4 house tables were gone. Instead, there were more than 100 smaller tables, all facing the same way, at each of which sat a student, head bent low, scribbling on a roll of parchment. The only sound was the scratching of quills and the occasional rustle as somebody adjusted their parchment. It was clearly exam time. Sunshine was streaming in through the high windows onto the bench head, the bent heads, which shone chestnut and copper and gold in the bright light. Harry looked around carefully. Snape had to be here somewhere. This was his memory. And there he was, at a table right behind Harry. Harry stared. Snape the teenager had a stringy, pallid look about him, like a plant kept in the dark. His hair was lank and greasy and was flopping onto the table, his hooked nose barely half an inch from the surface of the parchment as he scribbled. Harry moved around behind Snape and read the heading of the exam paper. Defense against the Dark Arts, ordinary wizarding level. So Snape had to be 15 or 16, around Harry's own age. His hand was flying across the parchment. He had written at least a foot more than his closest neighbors, and yet his writing was minuscule and cramped. 5 more minutes. The voice made Harry jump. Turning, he saw the top of Professor Flitwick's head moving between the desks a short distance away. Professor Flitwick was walking past a boy with untidy black hair. Very untidy black hair. Harry moved so quickly that had he been solid, he would have knocked desks flying. Instead, he seemed to slide, dreamlike, across 2 aisles and up a third. The back of the black-haired boy's head drew nearer and nearer. He was straightening up now, putting down his quill, pulling his roll of parchment toward him, so as to reread what he had written. Harry stopped in front of the desk and gazed down at his 15-year-old father. Excitement exploded in the pit of his stomach. It was as though he was looking at himself, but with deliberate mistakes. James' eyes were hazel, his nose was slightly longer than Harry's, and there was no scar on his forehead, but they had the same thin face, same mouth, same eyebrows. James' hair stuck up at the back exactly as Harry's did. His hands could have been Harry's, and Harry could tell that when James stood up, they would be within an inch of each other's height. James yawned hugely and rumpled up his hair, making even messier than it had been. Then, with a glance toward Professor Flitwick, he turned in his seat and grinned at a boy sitting 4 seats behind him. With another shock of excitement, Harry saw Sirius give James a thumbs up. Sirius was lounging in his chair at his ease, tilting its back 2 legs. He was very good-looking. His dark hair fell into his eyes with a sort of casual elegance neither James nor Harry could ever have achieved. And a girl sitting behind him was eyeing him hopefully, though he didn't seem to have noticed. And 2 seats along from this girl, Harry's stomach gave another pleasurable squirm, was Remus Lupin. He looked rather pale and peaky. Was the full moon approaching? And was absorbed in the exam. As he reread his answers, he scratched his chin with the end of his quill, frowning slightly. So that meant Wormtail had to be around here somewhere, too, and sure enough, Harry spotted him within seconds, a small, mousy-haired boy with a pointed nose. Wormtail looked anxious. He was chewing his fingernails, staring down at his paper, scuffing the ground with his toes. Every now and then he glanced hopefully at his neighbor's paper. Harry stared at Wormtail for a moment, then back at James, who was now doodling a bit of scrap paper. He had drawn a snitch and was now tracing the letters L-E. What did they stand for? Quills down, please, squeaked Professor Flitwick. That means you too, Stebbins. Please remain seated while I collect your parchment. Accio! More than 100 rolls of parchment zoomed into the air and into Professor Flitwick's outstretched arms, knocking him backward off his feet. Several people laughed. A couple of students at the front desk got up, took hold of Professor Flitwick beneath the elbows and lifted him onto his feet again. Thank you, panted Professor Flitwick. Very well, everyone, you're free to go. Harry looked down at his father, who had hastily crossed out the L-E he had been embellishing, jumped to his feet, and stuffed his quill and the exam question paper into his bag, which he slung over his back and stood waiting for Sirius to join him. Harry looked around and glimpsed Snape a short way away, moving between the tables toward the doors into the entrance hall, still absorbed in his own exam paper. Round-shouldered, yet angular, he walked in a twitchy manner that recalled a spider, his oily hair swinging about his face. A gang of chattering girls separated Snape from James and Sirius, and by planting himself in the midst of this group, Harry managed to keep Snape in sight while straining his ears to catch the voices of James and his friends. Did you like question 10, Moony? Asked Sirius as they emerged into the entrance hall. Loved it, said Lupin briskly. Give five signs that identify the werewolf. Excellent question. Did you think you managed to get all the signs? Said James in tone of mock concern. Think I did, said Lupin seriously as they joined the crowd thronging around the front doors, eager to get into the sunlit grounds. 1. He's sitting in my chair. 2. He's wearing my clothes. 3. His name's Remus Lupin. Wormtail was the only one who didn't laugh. I got the snout shape, the pupils of the eyes, the tough tail, he said anxiously, but I couldn't think what else. How thick are you, Wormtail? Said James impatiently. You run round with a werewolf once a month. Keep your voice down, implored Lupin. Harry looked anxiously behind him again. Snape remained close by, still buried in his exam question, but this was Snape's memory, and Harry was sure that if Snape chose to wander off in a different direction, once outside in the grounds, Harry, would not be able to follow James any farther. To his intense relief, however, when James and his 3 friends strode off down the lawn toward the lake, Snape followed, still poring over the paper and apparently with no fixed idea of where he was going. By jogging a little ahead of him, Harry managed to maintain a close watch on James and the others. Well, I thought that paper was a piece of cake, he heard Sirius say. I'll be surprised if I don't get outstanding on it, at least. Me too, said James. He put his hand in his pocket and took out a struggling golden snitch. Where'd you get that? Nicked it, said James casually. He started playing with the snitch, allowing it to fly as much as a foot away and seizing it again. His reflexes were excellent. Wormtail watched him in awe. They stooped in the shade of the very same beech tree on the edge of the lake where Harry, Ron, and Hermione had spent a Sunday finishing their homework and threw themselves down on the grass. Harry looked over his shoulder yet again and saw, to his delight, that Snape had settled himself on the grass in the dense shadows of a clump of bushes. He was as deeply immersed in OWL paper as ever, which left Harry free to sit down on the grass between the beech and the bushes and watch the foursome under the tree. The sunlight was dazzling on the smooth surface of the lake, as the bank of which the group of laughing girls who had just left the great hall were sitting with shoes and socks off, cooling their feet in the water. Lupin had pulled out a book and was reading. Sirius stared around at the students, milling over the grass, looking rather haughty and bored, but very handsomely so. James was still playing with the snitch, letting it zoom farther and farther away, almost escaping, but always grabbing at the last second. Wormtail was watching him with his mouth open. Every time James made a particularly difficult snatch, Wormtail gasped and applauded. After 5 minutes of this, Harry wondered why James didn't tell Wormtail to get a grip of himself, but James seemed to be enjoying the attention. Harry noticed his father had a habit of rumpling up his hair as though to make sure it didn't get too tidy, and also that he kept looking over at the girls by the water's edge. Put that away, will you? Said Sirius finally as James made a fine catch and Wormtail let out a cheer, before Wormtail wets himself from excitement. Wormtail turned slightly pink, but James grinned. If it bothers you, he said, stuffing the snitch back in his pocket. Harry had the distinct impression that Sirius was the only one for whom James would have stopped showing off. I'm bored, said Sirius. Wish it was full moon. You might, said Lupin darkly from behind his book. We've still got Transfiguration. If you're bored, you could test me. Here. He held out his book. Sirius snorted. I don't need to look at that rubbish. I know it all. This'll liven you up, Padfoot, said James quietly. Look who it is. Sirius' head turned. He had become very still, like a dog that had scented a rabbit. Excellent, he said softly. Snivellus. Harry turned to see what Sirius was looking at. Snape was on his feet again and was stowing the OWL paper in his bag. As he emerged from the shadows of the bushes and set off across the grass, Sirius and James stood up. Lupin and Wormtail remained sitting. Lupin was still staring down at his book, though his eyes were not moving, and a faint frown line had appeared between his eyebrows. Wormtail was looking from Sirius and James to Snape, with a look of avid anticipation on his face. All right, Snivellus, said James loudly. Snape reacted so fast, it was as though he had been expecting an attack. Dropping his books, he plunged his hand inside his robes, and his wand was halfway into the air when James shouted, Expelliarmus! Snape's wand flew 12 feet into the air and fell with a little thud in the grass behind him. Sirius let out a bark of laughter. Impedimenta, he said, pointing his wand at Snape, who was knocked off his feet halfway through a dive forward toward his own fallen wand. Students all around had turned to watch. Some of them had gotten to their feet and were edging nearer to watch. Some looked apprehensive, others entertained. Snape lay panting on the ground. James and Sirius advanced on him, wands up, James glancing over his shoulder at the girls at the water's edge as he went. Wormtail was on his feet now, watching hungrily, edging around Lupin to get a clearer view. "How'd the exam go, Snively?" said James. "I was watching him. His nose was touching the parchment," said Sirius viciously. "There'll be grease marks all over it. They won't be able to read a word." Several people watching laughed. Snape was clearly unpopular. Wormtail sniggered shrilly. Snape was trying to get up, but the jinx was still operating on him. He was struggling, as though bound by invisible ropes. "You wait," he panted, staring up at James with an expression of purest loathing. "You wait." "Wait for what?" said Sirius coolly. "What are you going to do, Snively? Wipe your nose on us?" Snape let out a scream of mixed swear words and hexes, but his wand being 10 feet away, nothing happened. "Wash your mouth out," said James coldly. "Scourgify." Pink soap bubbles steamed from Snape's mouth at once. The froth was covering his lips, making him gag, choking him. "Leave him alone!" James and Sirius looked around. James' free hand jumped to his hair again. It was one of the girls from the lake edge. She had thick, dark red hair that fell to her shoulders, and startlingly green, almond-shaped eyes. Harry's eyes. Harry's mother. "All right, Evan," said James, and the tone of his voice was suddenly pleasant, deeper, more mature. "Leave him alone," Lily repeated. She was looking at James with every sign of great dislike. "What's he done to you?" "Well," said James, appearing to deliberate the point, "it's more the fact that he exists, if you know what I mean." Many of the surrounding watchers laughed. Sirius and Wormtail included, but Lupin, still apparently intent on his book, didn't, and neither did Lily. "You think you're funny," she said coolly, "but you're just an arrogant, bullying toe-rag, Potter. Leave him alone." "I will if you go out with me, Evan," said James quickly. "Go on, go out with me, and I'll never lay a wand on old Snively again." Behind him, the impediment jinx was wearing off. Snape was beginning to inch towards his fallen wand, spitting out soap suds as he crawled. "I wouldn't go out with you if it was a choice between you and the giant squid," said Lily. "Bad luck, Prawn," said Sirius briskly, turning back to Snape. "Oi!" But too late. Snape had directed his wand straight at James. There was a flash of light and a gash appearing on the side of James's face, splattering his robes with blood. James whirled about. A second flash of light later, James was hanging upside down in the air. James whirled about. A second flash of light later, Snape was hanging upside down in the air, his robes falling over his head to reveal skinny, pallid legs and a pair of graying underpants. Many people in the small crowd watching cheered. Sirius, James, and Wormtail roared with laughter. Lily was furious. Expression had twitched from an instant, as though she was going to smile, said, "Let him down." "Certainly," said James, and he jerked his wand upward. Snape fell into a crumpled heap on the ground. Disentangling himself from his robes, he got quickly to his feet, wand up, but Sirius said, "Petrificus totalis," and Snape keeled over again, at once, rigid as a board. "Leave him alone," Lily shouted. She had her own wand out now. James and Sirius eyed it warily. "Ah, Evans, don't make me hex you," said James earnestly. "Take the curse off him, then." James sighed deeply, then turned to Snape and muttered the counter-curse. "There you go," he said, as Snape struggled to his feet again. "You're lucky Evans was here, Snivellus. I don't need help from filthy little mudbloods like her." Lily blinked. "Fine," she said coolly. "I won't bother in future. And I'd wash your pants if I were you, Snivellus." "Apologize to Evans," James roared at Snape, his wand pointed threateningly at him. "I don't want you to make him apologize," Lily shouted, rounding on James. "You're as bad as he is." "What?" yelped James. "I never call you a you-know-what. Messing up your hair because you think it looks so cool. Messing up your hair because you think it looks cool to look like you've just got off your broomstick, showing off with that stupid snitch, walking down corridors and hexing anyone who annoys you just because you can. I'm surprised your broomstick can get off the ground with that fat head on it. You make me sick." She turned on her heel and hurried away. "Evans!" James shouted after her. "Hey, Evans!" But she didn't look back. It goes on a little bit longer. but I feel like I've already read for like 20 minutes, so that's probably enough time. I love this part of Harry Potter. There's so many thoughts that I have. I think the biggest thing is that the first time that you read this, you think that it is Snape's worst memory because he is so embarrassed to be taunted by James Potter, to be put upside down and have the entire school that's out on the lawn see his sort of graying old underwear, and just to have so much humiliation. But what I think is so interesting and what's so beautiful about Snape's character and about J.K. Rowling's writing is that has nothing to do with why this is Snape's worst memory, and that you don't find out why this is Snape's worst memory until the 7th book, so 2 books from now, when Snape has just died and gives Harry his memories, and Harry is allowed to go watch the aftermath of what happened. And what happens is that Snape is sleeping outside of Gryffindor common room, and is so apologetic towards Lily for what he said, what he called her, that he called her a mudblood. And she can't forgive him. She has already forgiven him for so much. She's already talked away all of the bad things that he's been doing, and this is sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back, and she just can't keep going on being his friend, and he has so much love for her, and he just can't show it, and he doesn't know how to, and he loses her in this moment. He loses her forever. And even though he spends his whole entire life trying to make up for that, there's really no going back. He's lost. And she not only will never love him again, or will never love him, but won't even be a part of his life anymore. And I think, that moment is just so terrible for him, and it's something that he doesn't want Harry to see. And I think, there's a lot of complex things that are going on in this, apart just from the humiliation and like horrible bullying that is happening, and apart from the complexity of Snape's character and what this actually means and what you find out later, but also just all of the other interactions. So, for instance, I think nobody talks about how Harry is really not the best person either. I mean, he has gone through a lot, and he, in a lot of ways, is an incredible hero, but the fact that he would go into someone's memory that they are really trying to keep from you is horrible. Like, to me, that's like someone reading someone's diary, I think it's something that is just unforgivable. Like, how could you ever do that to someone? And I understand that him and Snape have a very complex relationship, but I still find that to just be awful. And I don't think anybody talks about how terrible that was, and how intrusive, and how awful, like, it just, I think that shows some of Harry's flaws. Other thoughts that I have about this, as I was rereading it, is I am part of the fandom that believes that Sirius Black was also gay. J.K. Rowling has come out and said that Dumbledore was gay, which I don't know. I think is a little bit of a cop-out because it wasn't actually part of the books in any way, and so I think I would have liked her to actually write him as a gay man and have that really be a part of the story. And I understand that they were written at a slightly different time, but like in reality, they were only like 20 years ago, and I think that could have done a lot for getting gay rights to be something that people are talking about a little bit more, if this like really beloved character was written to be who he actually was and who she has admitted that he is. But I also think Sirius Black was gay. And I have a lot of reasons for that. But some of the biggest ones are actually from this excerpt from this book. So she talks so much about how Sirius was just this beautiful person who was, and by beautiful, I mean like handsome. I don't mean that he was like a good person. I mean, he was a good person, but he was also flawed. But that he was so handsome and like he was just like just completely beautiful. Like, and I think what's so interesting is that she purposely writes in there that there were girls who were looking at him and kind of like constantly wanting to like catch his glance, but that he just like doesn't give a fuck. He's like bored by it all and just keeps, you know, looking at James and is like annoyed by James like flirting and like wanting to catch the snitch and stuff like that. I think that in my mind, a teenage boy who is that good looking would probably be flirting a lot more. Which I don't know. I was never a teenage boy, so who knows what I'm thinking. But there's just so many examples of why I think Sirius was gay, and I think there are multiple examples of women and girls trying to engage with him and him just like blowing it off and like having no interest whatsoever. So yeah, and I think you see that again with Tonks and him. Like at first Harry thinks that maybe Tonks was in love with him, and you know, that would be weird because they are like first cousins, but and really she's sad because she's in love with Lupin, but you know, I just think like there could have been this romantic character development with Sirius, and there never was. And I think there never was because he was gay as well, which I just think is so interesting. The other thing that I think is really interesting is Wormtail in this. So Wormtail is just like the worst. He's a horrible character, and I don't understand why they were even friends with him at this time. But I think it's really interesting that in this excerpt, she talks about James and Sirius and Lupin and Remus Lupin, but J.K. Rowling always refers to Peter Pettigrew as Wormtail in this. And I think it is important because it shows that he's just like a little he's just a little rat. And he is in the friend group, but like nobody really knows why because nobody really likes him. And then his betrayal of the Potters is just disgusting. But anyway, I think that this is just such a wonderful part of the book. I also love this part where James is drawing his snitch and then he writes L-E, and obviously that's Lily Evans. And I just think it's so cute that he's like been in love with Lily forever, but kind of doesn't want to admit it to anybody. But so that's all I've got. Into the Pensieve, Snape's worst memory, from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Maggie, future Maggie, for wanting to watch yourself hear about the things that you are knitting and about your life right now. Anyway, probably won't be back for another month or so. I've got a really busy couple of weeks. I'm applying to residency, which is crazy. It's probably what I should be working on now, but obviously I'm not doing that. But yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much.